Welcome, Red Ice members. Thank you very much for tuning in. We are continuing our fascinating conversation with David Wilcock. And I want to begin this segment here right away to dive into some of the material from his presentation called the 2012 Enigma. And David, you did this conference a while back. It was filmed and it is available right now on Google Video under the title The 2012 Enigma. And
it's about 90 minutes long, 95 minutes, and it's all free. And what I did is I rebuilt my whole PowerPoint presentation in the video software program I was using, so that you actually get it's kind of like halfway between a PowerPoint presentation and a documentary film.
It works very well,
nice.
I think. Yeah.
I mean, people really have resonated with it because I just go through this amazing body of material that changes how you see yourself.
Indeed. And, one thing that I love to touch upon here right at the start is some of the symbolism, as it were, of the pineal gland and how this actually have, or the pine cone, how this have kind of been transplanted, used, and transformed throughout the different ancient civilizations, basically. I mean, it's fascinating what you brought up there.
That's one of the things that's really captivated people's imagination is when you realize that you actually have this gland in your brain that functions as a hyperdimensional gateway, and that the ancient people seem to know enough about it that it was routinely used, the pine cone motif, in every single ancient culture over and over again. They have the same symbolism. And that can't be accidental. It can't be a coincidence. As I go into in the video, it also includes in the Vatican, the largest sculpture in the Vatican Square. The actual court is called the Court of the Pine Cone. It's this gigantic pine cone that's as tall as 3 human beings, standing on this giant pedestal, flanked by peacocks, which look a little bit like an Egyptian ibis, and also flanked by an open sarcophagus. And then on the bottom, you have these 2 little lions that are on these carved platforms with Egyptian hieroglyphics on them. What the heck is that thing doing in the Vatican?
Yeah.
And why would they use all this Egyptian symbolism and have everything oriented around a giant pine cone as the main motif of the entire court outside? Well, what if Atlantean knowledge has been kept secret in the Vatican Library, and then that Atlantean knowledge turned into Egyptian knowledge and was kept secret by the Egyptian priesthood, and it was all about the idea that there is this gland in the brain that is your hyperdimensional gateway, and that this gland in the brain was reverse engineered into a technology that allowed them to see outside linear time, now it's called the looking glass. We don't know what it was called back then. And that they actually had working prototypes and had them for thousands of years, and they were kept highly secret and guarded. And with this, they were able to predict what was going to happen to the country and protect it from danger. And it's still, some of the old Atlantean ones apparently still exist and are still around.
Do you think so?
That's what I've been told. Now that falls back on the credibility of the informant.
Sure.
But I've heard it from more than one informant. And these informants seem to be pretty consistent in the level of quality of the things they've been telling me.
Fascinating. And I mean, we know about, as you mentioned here, we know about the connection between the Vatican and how this have moved through the Roman Empire and consequently afterwards, that they've adopted this from the into the Catholic Church basically. But
the Egyptians had the Library of Alexandria, and a lot of the best stuff from that was co-opted and stored in the Vatican Library.
Well, there you go. And that's another, I think, misdemeanor, as it were, in regards to what actually happened with a lot of the knowledge. In many cases, they say that it was burned down, has been destroyed. Right. We can even look at the conquistadors that went over to South America. I believe a lot of the knowledge actually was taken back to Rome and actually not burned at the site.
Yeah, isn't it a convenient little cover story to say, it all burned down, it's gone?
Of course, yeah.
9/11 was a bunch of terrorists that brought down the Twin Towers with box cutters on an airplane.
Same old story, huh?
They've been doing the same thing for thousands of years.
Of course.
The Library of Alexandria is alive and well in the Vatican, trust me.
That's interesting. And, one thing that comes to mind also then, of course, is that it kind of struck me as I looked at the symbolism here, and you mentioned that there actually were a connection between the Templars, the Vatican, and how they used similar, geometry. They've adopted the ratios of the Great Pyramid, etc. There's, much here to go into, but as an overall picture that developed here, so to speak, was that you can also see that a lot of this knowledge that they have had for these, many thousands of years now has actually worked in many cases to also suppress people and their connection to the divine. They're using this kind of symbolism, and yet to me, the Vatican and even the Knights Templar at this point represents a lot of the suppression of this kind of knowledge, but yet there it is in the open.
They didn't always suppress it, though. I want to just, I'm not defending them, but I want to make one point. Mm-hmm. I came across a piece of credible information recently that surprised the heck out of me. The Templars would organize villages through the church, and the priesthood was obviously aware of this, where they would instruct everyone that on Saturday night, at a certain time, they would ring the church bell, and everyone in the village was instructed to make love. All the married couples were instructed to make love at the same time. And then what they were able to do, the priests were able to do, is use Atlantean technology, more or less, to be able to take the energy that all the people are harnessing in the lovemaking. Now, they're ringing the bell. The bell itself is a pyramid shape. Mm-hmm. When you have a bell tower, the bell is at the top of the tower. The bell focuses the energy back down from the earth and centralizes it to the person underneath that tall pillar. Mm-hmm. So the shape of the bell is part of the design. So you've got these guys under the bell as they're ringing it, and everybody is making love, which means this is a great amount of consciousness energy that's being raised. The people that are sitting under the tower in the middle of the town, under the bell, will be able to have a much greater mystical access than normal. And that in turn enables them to basically travel in time, travel through time and space with their mind, be able to access mystical consciousness for the guidance of the people. Now, I don't think this was being done negatively at all. I mean, the people were not told what was going on, but the overall effect was positive. Now, I want to point out that you don't need to have a whole village of people make love when you ring a bell at Saturday night anymore, because the whole planet is now doing that. The whole planet is like all those people making love and the energy that's raised. So it no longer is required that you do that, but that dovetails in very nicely with these giant group meditations that are done that do affect the planet in a very positive way by changing the consciousness frequency and causing less violence and less aggression and hostility. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So yeah, getting back to your thing, it is absolutely true that secret traditions have now largely been co-opted by the negative. That's not the way it always was. There were positive secret traditions that were being kept secret because it was felt the public wasn't ready for it, but the underlying working of the society was not fundamentally negative. And it's just over time that the negatives have infiltrated more and more of these societies from the top level, gotten rid of the people that were positive, and co-opted them. So again, if somebody comes to you and says they're a member of a secret society and want you to join, it's probably not a good idea to do that, because I think we're at an age now where all the secrets are being made open, and there's no need to keep it under lock and key anymore. So, this is an era in which all knowledge is available to us, and everything there is to know is now available. So to find your own path, you don't need somebody else to tell you what to study.
Right. We're, in a way, I guess, with the web and whatnot, we're kind of rebuilding the Library of Alexandria, if you will, in a way.
Oh, yeah. For years before I ever started to do videos and conferences on a larger level like I am now, the main way in which everybody was finding me was Google searches, because I'd written about so much esoteric stuff. Somebody'd go online, they'd Google a particular concept, and then they'd look at the choices that came up, and mine would be the best written of the choices because I'm a good writer. And tons of people found me by doing keyword searches on some little metaphysical thing they were interested in, and they came to my website, and then they kind of got drawn into the greater teaching. So I have always felt as if the internet is this wonderful global mind And I love the opportunity to install things in the global mind that had not been there before, knowing that anyone in the world who wants information on that topic will now be able to find it as a result of my having written about it, if it wasn't already there.
Yeah, very good. And, staying within the field of the Vatican, I have a few more things I'd just like to address and see if you want to pick up on it or not. And I think you had, in your talk, you actually had a picture of this in there. This is a sculpture in the courtyard of the Pine Cone. This is in Vatican City.
Pine Cone Square.
Pine Cone Square, exactly. And this is a sculpture by a guy called Arnaldo Pomordo, I think, if I pronounce his name correctly. And this is...
Oh, you've done more research than me on this. This is interesting. Go ahead.
All right. No, this is just the... I call it basically a planetary collision. This looks like a sphere with a smaller sphere inside it, and it's got these huge scars on it. Do you know which one I'm referring to?
Oh, you're talking about what I call the big mirror ball.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know what this is.
It's a sphere within a sphere. Yeah, I've heard that.
Exactly. And to me, actually, I've done a parallel image between. Actually, not overlaid, but I've had the sphere on top, and then a picture of the Great Valles Marineris on Mars, and these.
No kidding.
This looks very similar, in the way there are, designed basically, and I have no idea if there's a hint.
So the inner sphere could be Mars, and the outer sphere could be the Earth.
Or reverse. I've even pondered upon the fact that this might be Venus or something. Going back to Velikovsky's idea that this has been expelled from the planet or whatever. Not sure at all. This is just pure speculation, of course. But I don't know if there's any kind of hint here at all.
Well, I mean, here's a concrete thing that we know. The whole outline of Washington, D.C. can be superimposed over the Cydonia region of Mars, which is an alleged humanoid civilization that built pyramids and a giant monument in the shape of a human face and various other things that have these interesting geometric alignments to each other.
Yeah.
And there is a 5-sided pentagonal pyramid on the face of Mars in the Cydonia region. And if you size it over the Pentagon in Washington, then all of these Cydonia monuments on Mars correspond precisely with the location of the most important buildings in Washington, including the fact that the so-called face on Mars is right where the White House is, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt in my mind, when you go back to the Casey readings, he describes a previous incarnation of his as the Atlantean priest King Rata, and there is a function of Rata's research that involved archaeology, where the readings only said that he found evidence of our distant ancestry in the form of direct ruins. Now, the Casey scholars automatically assume that must mean something on Earth. But if you look at the train of evidence, it appears that given that they had these anti-gravity technologies, if you believe the legend, they could have easily traveled to Mars and found evidence of ruins on Mars, and maybe even explored them to some degree, and that could have been why the Atlanteans had blueprints of Cydonia, which in turn were then used to build the Washington, D.C. outline. I mean, obviously, D.C. was designed well before we ever had satellite photos of Mars, and yet they built it to be this way. So they must have had maps in those secret scrolls somewhere that showed them what was on Mars.
Yeah. And, I mean,
so I wouldn't at all be surprised if the Vatican was commemorating Mars in some way with a sculpture. That would make total sense.
Well, exactly, and it kind of might be... It might be evidence of a cataclysm that happened there. It might even be, I don't know if we want to go so far to say that some of these people that were Atlanteans to begin with actually came from Mars, but that's another possibility, So.
Yeah, I've spoken about this before. The Law of One material seems to be a highly credible intuitive source. I would actually rank it as the highest in credibility of any intuitive source, and that's my personal preference. But a lot of people agree with me, and in this Law of One material, there is no mention of a Planet X, as because they were asked at one point, what are all